Good morning. I'm told that this session should be brevity and succinctness. So I'm going to try to get right into it. From the beginning, the Oregon Business Plan has built initiatives to create an environment in Oregon where all are well prepared for work that can sustain them and their families. We are not there yet. To underscore that, let me just pass on one quick observation from my own perspective. Consistently, more than 50% of the individuals evaluated for work do not have the requisite skill sets or workforce acumen. Clearly, we have a lot to do. George, I'd like for you to frame the problem for us on a larger scale and give us a sense of direction.
Sam, that's a wonderful challenge. I hope I'm up to it, but I think the people in the room are up to addressing it. The Oregon Business Plan, if you take a look at it, is premised on the assumption that for Oregon and Oregonians to be successful in the 21st century, we have to have a level of educational attainment that exceeds what we have seen in the past. I think that's one of the reasons that Wally asked you the questions that he did. And let's turn for a moment to the first slide, which will show you how well you did in determining the young adult population. If you look at the 1960s, look way up at the top of this chart. The United States had the best high school diploma record in the world, and Oregon was the best of the best. So in other words, we had more people, a higher proportion of our workforce, of our adults who had high school diplomas than just about anybody else in the world. Where are we today? As you can see, and for those of you who were not quite as pessimistic as others, we have slipped. We've slipped to 13th. More troubling, in fact, is that Oregon has slipped even faster than the national average. Now we're looking at some of the other countries. Take a look at the Russian Federation, about the 11th one down. You can see that they started around 70% in the 1960s and are now right around 90%. We've now been passed by Estonia, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and other countries. They are investing in their education. Their students are succeeding. Let's look at post-secondary education briefly. In the 1960s, without question, we were number one. In the next slide, we'll show that Oregon was slightly better, actually, than the national average. But the chart really shows that the United States had the best educated population in the world at that time. Where have we gone since then? If you take a look, we now rank 8th in the world in terms of post-secondary education. Better than some of you thought, but a long way from being first any longer at a time when education is really the premium that will determine the success of a society and economy in the 21st century. Oregon has actually slipped backward faster than the national average. And if you take a look at Ireland, about 2/3 of the way down the page, they started out very, very low, around 15%. They've now eclipsed us in 40 years because they have focused on building the educational attainment of their population. Clearly, we have a challenge before us. But I think that, as you'll see in the Oregon Business Plan, starting on page 21, the Business Council has addressed this in many ways. Last year, Governor Kulongoski and the legislature came up with what I will call a 40-40-20 plan that says that 40% of our adults should have a baccalaureate or a master's degree or a PhD or a professional degree, that 40% of our adult Oregonians should have a community college associate degree or an apprenticeship, and 20% should have high school diplomas or GEDs, and 0% should have no high school at all. I want you to look at this last chart. This is the one that, to me, is the most distressing. If you look down at the bottom, you can see that for those of us who were educated in the 50s and the 60s, who actually were part of that first slide showing high school attainment and post-secondary attainment, we, in fact, have a 40% post-secondary rate and only an 8% lack of high school. You go up to that top bar, the 25 to 34-year-olds. the young adults in our population. 35% have post-secondary credentials, which is less than in my generation, but what's even more distressing is that 14% have not finished high school. How are they prepared for the future? That is why the 40-40-20 plan matters. That is why we have to begin to make three very serious investments in this state. The first is to invest in the capacity for the community colleges and the universities to serve those students and to build our education attainment of the adult population. The second is to make college affordable. And Governor Kulongoski this afternoon will talk about some major improvements that were made by this state in this year that will actually serve as a national model for how to do that. But the third, and going back to this slide, the thing that I want you to think most seriously about, the third, in fact, is to improve what we in higher ed call the pipeline, but for most of you is called success in secondary education, success in K-12. If we, in fact, adjust ourselves to think about 40-40-20, we are giving ourselves and our whole state hope, and we will raise performance. That, Sam, I think, is how we should approach this.
Thank you very much, George.